Have you ever thought about what happens after death? What if someone came back from there with a direct message from Jesus about what will happen in 2025? In today's video, you will meet Ethan Graves, a former atheist who died for a few minutes and saw the spiritual plan that is about to be fulfilled. An invisible war has already begun, and almost no one is prepared. Like the video, subscribe to the channel and comment below which city you are watching. Let's wake up those who are still sleeping together. My name is Ethan Graves. I've never been one to believe anything I couldn't prove. I grew up in Detroit, among sirens, cracked concrete and broken promises. The closest church to me was an abandoned house with a rusty cross on the facade. God, sky, life after death. For me, all of this was emotional anesthesia for those who couldn't bear to face the chaos of reality. I pursued a career as a systems engineer, worked in cybersecurity for the government, and in February 2024, I was sent on a technical mission to Nevada desert to investigate a series of flaws in a classified military AI installation. It was a clear, dry afternoon, the kind of day when the world seems too calm to be trusted. We were inside the underground bunker, surrounded by machines that thought faster than us and knew more than they should. And that's when a siren sounded, one that no one had ever heard before, a serious, low sound, like a metallic whisper coming from the bottom of the earth, and then, white light, a flash, silence. I didn't feel pain. There was no scream. There was no fall. It was as if existence had been interrupted, with a period. But that's where it started. I awakened, but not in my body. I was floating above the bunker, seeing everything with impossible clarity. The ceiling was gone. The concrete had been turned into cosmic dust, and my body was down there among the wreckage. But I didn't feel trapped. I didn't feel dead. On the contrary, I felt more alive than I had ever felt. The air around me was thick, as if made of pure consciousness, and I soon realized there was no time. Everything happened at once. I could see sounds, feel colors, hear thoughts that weren't mine. The space around me began to fold, like paper being silently torn apart. Behind the fold, an absurd light, not bright like a light bulb, but alive, intelligent, conscious. And then he appeared. Didn't walk. It didn't fly. He just was. His presence crushed all the pride within me. He was not the Jesus of the paintings, and he was fire. He was glory. He was truth in the form of being. When he looked at me, nothing remained hidden. No excuses, no arguments, no self-defense. He knew everything and yet didn't despise me. And before I asked, he replied, "You died in the body, but you were summoned in the spirit, because their plan has already begun, and in 2025, it will be too late." I trembled. "Who are they?" I asked with thought, but the answer didn't come with words, came with visions. The sky opened like a living canvas. I saw cities, glowing with neon and darkness at the same time, people walking down the streets with their eyes glued to screens floating in the air. I heard a voice, digital, sweet, addictive, whispering in souls, "You're safe, you're free, you're right." But it was a lie. Everything was a lie. The world was being packed to sleep. I remember looking around, trying to understand where I was. There was no ground, no sky, no horizon, just this living immensity, as if existence itself had breath. But what shocked me most was what I felt. Not fear, not peace, but urgency, as if everything was on edge, as if time was about to collapse. It was then that Jesus, and I have no other name to give to that presence, because everything inside me screamed that it was him. He raised his hand. And when he did this, the space behind us shattered like glass, revealing something that looked like a map, but not geographic. It was an influence map of spiritual currents, of human decisions having invisible consequences. And he said, "Not with sound, but directly inside me. They don't need to destroy the world, Ethan. They just need to make you love comfort more than the truth." I saw it with my own eyes, or whatever I was using to see it. Millions of people living in bubbles of distraction, fueled by algorithms, soothing voices, and endless content. Children who no longer knew how to look at the sky. Young people who confused access to information with wisdom. Men and women being slowly sedated by a plastic spirituality, made of beautiful phrases, but without cross, without sacrifice, without transformation. And then, I saw 2025, not as a date, but as a spiritual portal. He was suspended above the map, pulsing like a heart about to fail. Every second, lines of light and darkness rushed towards him, feeding him. Some were hidden acts of love, a solitary prayer, a difficult forgiveness, a truth spoken in silence. But others were absences, lack of courage, of faith, of regret. Jesus showed me how the real plan behind 2025 was not political, it was not military, was spiritual. They, the architects of deception, the invisible influencers, the bearers of the veil, were using technology and distraction to numb the human spirit before the big decision. And then came the revelation that changed everything for me. Jesus looked directly at me and said, "The biggest attack of 2025 will be against perception. They will not come with weapons. They will come with narratives. They will come with conveniences, with artificial peace, and the world will accept it." I fell to my knees, because in that moment, I saw people I loved, friends, colleagues, even my ex-fiancé, handing over your spiritual freedom in exchange for digital comfort, without knowing they were turning off inside. The war will not be televised. It is already happening, in the silence of small decisions, and most don't even realize they're struggling. The next vision was like being thrown into a parallel reality, but one that, deep down, it was our own reality without any filter. It was as if Jesus was peeling back the veneer of civilization and showing me what really lay behind modern behavior. And what I saw tore me apart. It was not explicit violence, nor visible oppression. It was worse. It was comfortable conformity. I saw entire families gathered in rooms with bluish light coming from the screens, but without any glances exchanged between them. I saw children growing up not with the voices of their parents, but with the voices of virtual avatars. I saw churches full, but empty of real presence. I saw charismatic preachers, full of applause, but with opaque eyes, because they had exchanged the anointing for the algorithm. And then Jesus spoke again, with that voice that does not leave the ears but explodes in the spirit. They don't want to create martyrs. They want to create sleepers. This shocked me, because I always thought that evil would come as censorship, as direct oppression, as fire and persecution. But no, their true plan is more subtle. They want to keep us distracted enough to never take a stand. They don't want our revolt. They want our silence. It was then that I was taken to a room, or rather, a living chamber made of time and choice. It was like being inside the collective mind of humanity. Every thought, every decision, every abdication was recorded there. And in the center of the room, I saw a book, but not like any other book. He was made of liquid light, and each page vibrated with real decisions made in the physical world. Jesus pointed to a specific page. At the top it was written, "Early 2025, and there it was. A young man decided not to confront a lie for fear of appearing intolerant. A mother felt like she should pray, but opened her cell phone instead. A pastor ignored the conviction of the Spirit to maintain sponsorship of the event. Each small deviation was a dark line in the fabric of reality. Their plan is simple," Jesus said. "Anesthetize until the truth seems radical and the error acceptable." But then, something took me away. I saw the other side of the page. I saw simple gestures that shattered their plan like glass under pressure. A teenager who fasted in secret, an elderly woman who prayed for strangers every day, a man who deleted a porn app at 3 a.m. and fell to his knees in tears. These small acts opened cracks in the domain of darkness. And Jesus said, "They want to anesthetize the generation, but I am marking the awakened ones." At that moment, I realized the attack is not against the visible church, but against the awakened spirit. It's not about banning faith. It's about emptying it until no one feels the need to resist anymore. And if you're listening to this, it's because there's something in you that still pulses. They have no power over those who still see. The next thing that happened was so intense and so personal, it's hard to put into words. Jesus took me, or perhaps projected me, into what he called domain of dormant souls, and I didn't expect to see what I saw. It wasn't hell. It wasn't heaven. It was a between place, a gray space where thousands, perhaps millions, of souls were suspended, not screaming, not crying, just off. They walked in circles, with their eyes closed even though they were open, as if they had given up looking for something that they no longer even remembered what it was. They were covered in a thick fog, made up of thoughts like, What's the point of fighting? Everyone does that. A little lying doesn't hurt. And then I understood. This is what happens when distraction wins over identity. Jesus was with me, not by my side, inside me. His presence was a fire that did not burn, but separated the true from the illusory. He explained to me that these souls were not lost due to lack of religion, but due to give up spiritual vigilance. They abandoned the truth slowly, one concession at a time. They surrendered to the plan, Jesus said, and the plan doesn't need violence. It just needs tiredness. And then came the most terrifying part. Some of these souls were still alive on earth. Yes, they were trapped in this spiritual space even with their bodies functioning normally. Walking, posting, smiling, but spiritually frozen, just living in automatic mode. And I saw how that happens. First, a small denial of commitment, then an ignored conviction, then a well-formulated apology, and finally, the inner silence. The point where God's voice becomes just an echo of the past. I asked, can they come back? Jesus replied, if someone awakens them, if someone has the courage to break the cycle. And at that moment, I saw a young woman kneeling alone in a dark room. She prayed with tears, not for herself, but for souls like these. Her every word came out like an arrow of light, and one of the souls in the mist trembled. It stopped. He raised his head, as if he felt hunger. And there I understood. The greatest power we have is not in what we say in pulpits or social media. It's in what we do when no one sees, in the secret life, at the hidden altar, in the whispered yes when the whole world is screaming no. Jesus looked at me and didn't need to say anything. Their plan is to weaken the invisible, but it is precisely in the invisible that the war will be won. After that vision of the dormant souls, I felt like I was being pulled up. Not with force, but with a kind of pull, inverted spiritual gravity. The gray place began to disappear, like mist before light, and then I found myself in front of something so sublime that my entire spirit fell silent. It was a living light amphitheater, but not as we know it. There was no stage, no audience. The space was formed by layers of sound, of presence, of pure intentions. There, prayers became matter. Every sincere intercession, every cry made in faith, even if timid, hovered like a suspended flame, vibrating with energy that I could feel in my chest. And in the center, what I can only call the throne, but it wasn't a seat. It was a point of convergence where everything, time, truth, identity, tilted. I knew without being told. That was the epicenter of the universe. And it was there that Jesus made me see something that changed everything about me. He pointed to a prayer, small, poorly articulated. It was from an elderly woman, alone, in a nursing home in Ohio. She whispered, "Sir, wake up my grandchildren. That's all. Let me see this before I leave." That whisper exploded before the throne like thunder, not because of its shape, but for your delivery. And then Jesus said, "Heaven doesn't move for those who scream the most. Heaven moves for those who truly surrender." I saw influencers with millions of followers, but their words rose like cold smoke, weightless, without impact. I saw pastors of large churches, with prayers written, decorated, beautiful, but spiritually mute. In contrast, I saw a 13-year-old girl praying in a dark basement, with no words, only tears, and the angels they ran to the sound of her crying. And I understood. Their plan is to convince us that spirituality is performance. But Jesus is looking at those who live in secret, at those who love when no one applauds, at those who pray when everything says it's no use. He showed me another page from that living book, also 2025, and there were marked the days when heaven would silence the voices that speak without faith and would exalt those who persevere in the hidden. It was like an inversion of human logic. The big ones would be ignored. The invisibles would be armed. Jesus then said, "In 2025, those with a microphone will lose ground. Those with a secret altar will be raised up, not by force, but by fire." At that moment, I saw columns of light rising from the earth, some from farms in the countryside, others from hidden apartments in cities, others even from prison cells. And what I saw made me shudder. These were the true leaders of the new spiritual battle. And I heard clearly, they don't want you to find out. Their real plan is to keep you distracted enough to never realize that heaven isn't waiting for more celebrities. It's waiting for surrendered hearts. And I knew, not with my brain, but with my soul, that the main stage of 2025 will not be the visible world. It will be the invisible altar of each individual. Jesus took me to an immense structure, as if it were made of compressed eternity. It looked like a temple, but there were no walls or doors, just presence. In the center, there was a pedestal of living stone, and on it, a colossal book, breathing as if he had lungs of light. This was the book of human choices. Jesus laid his hand on him. The book opened without a sound, but every page it turned made the universe shudder. When the page arrived at 2025, the atmosphere changed. It wasn't just another year. It was like a button being pressed, a spiritual trigger activating something that had been dormant for generations. And then he said, 2025 will not be remembered for big events, but for small decisions with big consequences. What I saw there shattered all my expectations. I expected to see wars, politicians, treaties, but what was written were names, stories, seemingly insignificant choices, but which, in the spiritual world, they made invisible structures tremble. I saw a father who decided return to pray with your family, and this prevented a suicide that was scheduled to occur days later. I saw a nurse who refused to lie in a medical report, and this simple choice generated a chain reaction that would culminate in the conversion of a future legislator. I saw a teenager who canceled his baptism out of shame, and with that, an entire line of your spiritual family has fallen asleep. Jesus then looked at me and said, their real plan is to make people believe that their choices are weightless, that everything is relative, that nothing matters, but everything matters. Each act of obedience glowed on the pages like fire. Each omission created a dark void, like holes in the fabric of time. I was shaking, not out of fear, but with reverence, because for the first time, I understood that the fate of the world is not in the hands of the powerful. It's in the silent decisions of ordinary people. And Jesus added, most of those who will change 2025 will never know it, but I will. On the middle page of the book, there was something written in letters that pulsed between light and shadow. They translated in my mind as, the world will be defined not by the shouting of the bad, but by the silence of the good. It was then that Jesus revealed the most shocking part. Some decisions were tampered with. I saw lines of code, yes, spiritual programming lines, inserted among human choices, interferences, non-human influences trying to redirect wills through technology, trauma, and even warped religion. They have already infiltrated the systems, but they cannot touch what is consecrated. With these words, I understood. 2025 is the year where the stage will be set, but we are the ones who decide the script. And there, in front of that living book, I knew, everything that seemed small here on earth is gigantic in the kingdom, and everything that seemed too great to fail is about to fall. Soon after the book closed, the scenery around me changed once again. The bright light was replaced by a wide field, almost like a model of the planet. But this mock-up, it was not made of earth or rock. It was made of spiritual structures, nations, churches, corporations, systems, all built with symbolic materials: pride, vanity, truth, lies, prayer, fear. Jesus said just one sentence, "Now see what really sustains the world." And then the wind came, not an ordinary wind. It was a breath that seemed to be made of judgment and mercy at the same time. When he touched each structure, it responded, not with automatic destruction, but with revelation. Structures made of religious vanity, churches, ministries, platforms built on ego, they began to fall apart on their own, not because of attack, but because they had no roots in heaven. I saw giant temples cracking from the inside. I saw famous preachers with faces covered in applause, but without a spiritual foundation. I saw the truth, removing the veneer of performance. Jesus spoke with pain in his voice, not anger. They preferred impact over intimacy, but everything that is not established in me will be shaken. Then, the wind touched governments. Nations that seemed indestructible began to tremble, not for war, but for exhibition. Ancient corruptions came to light. Secrets kept for decades were revealed to the world, and the rulers who had made pacts with lies, even under the guise of peace, fell without warning. 2025 will be the year of untold truth coming to light, said Jesus. Their real plan was to hide the collapse behind statistics and progress, but I will tear the veil. I saw economies collapse, not through scarcity, but through idolatry. Systems built on greed have been consumed by the same appetite that created them. I saw cities in chaos, not from external attack, but from collective spiritual disorientation. People no longer knew who to trust, but in the midst of the fall, I saw pillars that resisted. They were small, huts, families gathered around a Bible, communities praying in silence, young people with headphones, but listening to hidden praises in the middle of the night. These didn't shake, because they were planted in the eternal. Jesus then looked at me and said, "They prepared the stage of distraction, but I am lighting the stage of decision. In 2025, every structure will be tested, and only what was built with obedience will remain standing." I understood then that it wasn't just a warning, it was a summons. The time for appearances is over. Everything will be revealed. And whoever is still playing with spirituality, you will be surprised by the naked truth. After watching the structures fall, I imagined everything would be silence, devastation, the end. But what came next took me by surprise. The spiritual field before me darkened for an instant, not as an absence of light, but as if the world held its breath. And then, little by little, points of light began to appear. At first, they were tiny, one here, another one there, but they soon multiplied and like embers in a dry field ready to set fire to everything that was still alive. These dots began to rise. They were not angels, they were people. Men, women, teenagers, elderly people, sound of all races, cultures, and social classes. But they all had something in common. They carried an invisible mark on their chests. It didn't shine like decoration. Sheathe the sheep like a calling. Jesus then said, "These are mine, not the famous, not the celebrated, the ones who said yes in secret, who obeyed when no one saw, who didn't trade their faith for applause." And that's when I realized, the true army of the kingdom is already in position, and no one here on earth noticed. I saw a woman who worked as a janitor at a public school. Her prayer kept an entire neighborhood spiritually sane. I saw a young ex-addict who now prayed for hours before going to work in a garage. I saw a single mother who, despite being exhausted, woke up at dawn to cry out for her children. And then I saw something that chilled my soul. The enemy saw them too, only couldn't touch them. "They don't move by ambition, they move by mission," said Jesus. "That's why their plan will fail, because they forgot to consider the hidden ones." These people, without knowing it, were lines of spiritual resistance. Every time one of them prayed, lines of deception were undone in the invisible. With every act of silent holiness, spiritual territories changed hands. And I saw the demons retreating, not afraid of screams, but terrified of true surrender. Jesus then showed me a scene that I will never forget. A simple house, a grandfather with an open Bible, grandchildren all around, no music, no preaching, no show, just reading and praying. And at that time, a spiritual wall rose around that family, high, thick, impenetrable. They want you to think that protection comes from the outside, but in my kingdom, it comes from faithfulness. And it was there that I realized the final strategy of the kingdom of God for 2025, not to raise spiritual celebrities, but to awaken the invisible. People without a stage, but with weight. People without titles, but with authority. People without followers, but with fire. And I cried, because I realized that these are the true heroes of the end times, and many of them don't even know it. After showing me the hidden ones, those marked by the fire of obedience, Jesus said just one word, "Now look, the other side." I was immediately transported to a dense, almost sticky reality. It was dark, but not completely dark. There were artificial lights everywhere, signs, holograms, screens hovering in the air, smiling avatars, motivational messages, endless notifications. Everything seemed so modern, so efficient, so seductive, and in the middle of it all a figure appeared. It wasn't monstrous, it had no horns. She was charismatic, bright, persuasive. He had the face of a young, handsome, confident man. His gaze conveyed empathy. His voice was sweet, precise, welcoming. He smiled, but I felt the emptiness behind that smile. Jesus said, "This is the face of deception. It won't come with shouts. It will come with promises." This being, not human, but personified, was the spokesperson for a new global spirituality. He preached tolerance, but without regret. He talked about light, but he despised the cross. He defended love, but denied holiness. And the crowds followed him. Millions. Influencers cited him. Politicians listened to him. Churches reproduced it, but no one questioned it, because everything it seemed too good to be confronted. Jesus then showed me something terrible. His mark was not visible on the body, but on the mind. Ideas. Phrases like, truth is relative. God just wants you to be happy. There is no sin, only expression. These ideas, they were invisible tattoos in people's minds. They won't need to force anyone, said Jesus. People will run to the lie because it will come with comfort and acceptance. I saw a modern temple, without a cross, without a Bible, full of technology. A cult where the name of Jesus was mentioned, but not as Lord, as a coach, as a symbol, and in the center of the altar, the same smiling face, repeating promises of peace and abundance, without any sacrifice. And then I saw the year 2025 pulsing like a silent siren. The words that came out of this being went viral. AI started replicating them across millions of accounts. Digital platforms have created their own virtual messiahs, with sermons designed to please everyone and confront anyone. And then Jesus spoke, firmly, like thunder piercing my spirit. Their real plan is to replace my voice with a simulation of my presence, a spiritual hologram, a gospel without the cross, a truth without pain, a faith without transformation. The great seduction of 2025. It will not be political. It will be spiritual. A lie so well told that even the elected will feel like believing it. But then Jesus looked into my eyes and said, that's why you came back, to tell them, wake up now, because deception has already begun to smile at you, and many are smiling back. After Jesus revealed to me the face of deception and showed me how it had already infiltrated hearts, screens, doctrines, and even prayers, there was silence. But it wasn't an empty silence. It was a charged silence, like the second before thunder. And then he spoke, bluntly, time is not over yet, but the truce is. Those words went through me like an arrow, because deep down, I knew 2025 will not be the end. It will be the beginning of what can no longer be ignored. Jesus took me to a high place, as if I were above the earth, and the planet spun beneath me, but not as a physical globe. It pulsed with decisions. Lines of light and shadow intertwined like veins, and each was fueled by human choices, small, hidden, daily. And then Jesus showed me two simultaneous scenes. On one side, houses where parents knelt with their children, young people turning off cell phones to seek God, professionals making ethical decisions even under pressure, light appearing in unlikely places. On the other side, influencers promoting digital spirituality without a cross, children being indoctrinated by camouflaged entertainment, Christians trading conviction for convenience. And I understood, the real battlefield of 2025 will be the secret one. Jesus then stretched out his hand and placed a flame before me. She was small, but alive. He said, "This is the flame of silent obedience. It doesn't impress. It doesn't go viral. It isn't applauded. But she is the only thing that hell cannot erase." I saw this flame being passed from hand to hand, from generation to generation, from heart to heart. And even as religious structures crumbled, the flame was still alive, because in the end, it wasn't about buildings. It was about people, awakened people, surrendered people, people who understood that it's no longer possible to live in warm mode. Jesus then looked at me for the last time. His gaze carried the eternity and urgency of a calling. "You will forget many things from this vision, Ethan, but not the fire. The fire will follow you. It will burn. It will bother you. And when you open your mouth, it won't be words. It will be alarm. It will be waking up. It will be war." And at that moment, the whole sky seemed to bend down to hear my answer. I didn't say anything. I just fell to my knees. And when I looked up, I already knew. I didn't return to earth to live like before. I went back to light others, because the time for being a spectator is over. And the invisible war has already begun. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.